Scott Hensey here, talking about wax, toy sculpture wax. Why bother with wax? Well, generally if we're starting a toy, in this case an action figure, we get as far as we can with clay, get all the shapes and gestures and movements and textures in, and then you find that you need to get even tighter. So we make a silicone mold, cast wax, and that allows us to sharpen, to polish, to finish. Okay, let's make some wax. As I say, this was a personal recipe that I've been working on for a long time. We have carnauba, candelilla, I'm not sure that's how it's pronounced, but I call it candelilla. I put a little beeswax in there, some paraffin, and then filler, which allows you to carve it. I use talc, and then we use crayons for the coloring. Carnauba is there to make it a hard wax, and this is kind of something that a lot of sculptors don't like. They don't like it hard. They want it to be soft because they think it goes faster that way. I think you cut too deep when it's too soft, and then you got to go back and fill it in. And I don't think it polishes up as well without the carnauba. Carnauba has a higher melting point than the other waxes, so you have to put it in your fryer first and let it melt. So I've already done that. There it is, melted. Candelilla comes looking a little bit grainy, kind of like sand. Put that in. Not very much beeswax, very little. Then the paraffin. What I would do is let that melt down and then take my talc and pour it in on top. I color them with crayons. There's some white crayons in there, but I'm not going to tell you how many brown ones and how many red ones I use, because when you mix up your own wax, use my recipe, but come up with your own color. I think that's fair. Let it melt all day long. Then at the end of the day, you're going to stir it up. Don't start stirring it up until everything's melted, or you'll just have lumps and the boss will yell at you. I like to cast at about 170 degrees. This is important. If you're casting much cooler than that, you get a lot of chill lines, a lot of little lines that you're going to have to carve out. Hotter than that, and the material will actually separate in the mold. If you're going to pour it, you need something to pour it with. So I use this kind of flexible guy here to pour into the molds. When I've used that a few times, I end up with it coated like this. I can just bust it off. I'm back to clean again. I didn't use anything up. I don't have to throw anything away. When these things start to fall apart, get rid of them and get a new one. The reason is you don't want any foreign objects in your wax. I've heard a lot of people say, one of my bigger problems is I get stuff in my wax. How do I make sure I don't get the various debris? Well, I have a few rules that I go by. One is, these two little trays, those are the only places I ever put my tools. I never put them down on the table. Any wax that spills on the table is lost. Never put it back in the pot. If you just go by those few rules, your wax will stay clean. Oh, if you're casting into a silicone mold that is old, little hunks of silicone will come off on your casting. So just be advised, if something looks like it's falling apart, don't use it. Sometimes the casting you're making is so intricate that pouring in is gonna be a problem. So you get these big old syringes and you can suck it up in there and actually shoot it in. If I'm casting a piece that has a volume, it's kind of a round shape like this as opposed to a thin place, I might make a hollow casting. Just pour it in there and pour it out and let it roll around the inside. The reason for that is the wax will always shrink towards the center, and it'll shrink more uniformly that way if it's hollow. Whenever I cast wax and I get a part that is straight out of the mold, it's kind of rough, it's got parting lines on it, it's got scratches, it's got chill lines from the wax casting. And what I'd start with is a blade piece, and I get in there and just start polishing it off like that. I could never do that with clay. And what I'm doing to get my shape where I want it to be is that I'm going to cross the stroke this way and then that way, this way and then that way, until I'm down. You keep working the contours of the shape to keep the thing alive. This is my waxer. But as you can see, I can regulate the the temperature, wax will burn if it gets too hot. If it burns, it's no good to you. So you have to be careful. If I hold it against the block, the temperature will stay down, but as soon as I move away, it'll get too hot. If you want it to stick really well, you let it get kind of hot, and then I'm actually touching Charlie's head here and kind of melting the wax below so that it goes on without leaving a crack. You want a good bond. It's like welding, really. You want it to bond, not just sit on the surface. If I did this, that drop will fall off. As soon as that's cool, I can knock that right off, which is not what you want. So mostly, wax is just there to finish, just to put the hard edge lines in, and then they'll stay and be there when you come back. If this were a clay piece, while I'm working on this ear, I'm squishing that ear. So when I come back around, oops, I gotta fix this one, and now I'm squished that one. I could never start the work with wax because it would just take too long to build up the shapes. And the spontaneity of the pieces just could never be there. Starting with wax means you're gonna have a stiff and just overly thought out sculpture. And you want it to maintain some life. So there's kind of an overwhelming point where you start working on this stuff and you think, oh man, I'm never gonna get there. This is ridiculous. But you just, the whole trick to this is just sit there until you're done. Don't be disheartened, don't get up and run away screaming. Just sit there until you're done. That's the best thing I can tell you.